Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It's the 1st of May, and it feels like spring. And by that I mean, allergies and mold and that new sensation of sweat as our body pH changes to reflect the new season. And also improved sleep patterns. Yay, spring.
Yeah, my allergies are out of control today. I can feel it. It's like attacking my sinuses. It's crazy. Woo! Spring is great, but yeah, there's the side effects for sure.
Great.
I'll take them over seasonal affective disorder, though.
Yeah. And I'll put up with sweating if it means I don't ache. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like cold months because I get to wear hoodies and sweaters and bundle up. But I'd rather not if I didn't have to.
Yeah, and I'm ready to get rid of that winter weight where it is pretty much just the fluid that doesn't come off because we're not sweating as much.
Yeah.
I remember visiting New Orleans, and it's like just anywhere you go, you're sweating constantly. I ended up losing I think probably 10 pounds from just sweating constantly while being there. It's like everywhere the AC is on, but it's still as soon as you step outside, just instant sweat because of the humidity. And Bloomington, I mean, Indiana in general has humid summers, but it's just nowhere near the level of humidity as the deep south, where I think we really have the perfect climate, which is where I'm I'd rather have pollen and mold than brake dust and pollution.
Oh, yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with.
I'm cool with the variety
taking a little
of
allergy pill.
I'm really cool actually with the variety of seasons that we have. We get just enough cold and snow and sometimes some ice. We get hail that's just big enough to remind you that you don't go out when it's hailing, but it doesn't always destroy cars. The humidity is not it's oppressive, but it's not can't get up, can't move because if you move you might get too hot. Can't cool off in the shade at all. A breeze just makes you warmer. That's what I associate with actually that's what I associate with summers in East Texas.
Yeah, East Texas definitely gets really, really fucking humid close to the Gulf. Yeah, and that's where that Gulf humidity it's shit hits different. That's really oppressive. Where Indiana's shit is bad, and it can feel like you're walking through or moving through Jello, is how I would describe it. But the southern version of that, it's if we're in Jello, they're in mud. uh, and it's just, whoo,
So
that shit.
every time I've been in the presence of an ocean, I'll go walk out into it because that's fun. And the Pacific Ocean is, well, if I have the opportunity, rather, the Pacific Ocean is pretty cold in my experience. And the one time I had a chance to walk out into the Atlantic Ocean, it was, well, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't warm. But I did walk into the Caribbean one time, and that water was remarkably warm. Like I didn't get uncomfortable at all, and it had rained earlier that afternoon too. So like it should have cooled it off a little bit.
Yeah, big bodies of water will, if they get warm and they stay warm,
Yeah,
and it takes a long time for that shit to change temperature when it's that huge, which is where.
it's also really shallow all around the place that we were staying, and so I found myself walking further out from the beach than I'd ever in my life, like a football field worth of wading out till it's finally up to my shoulders. That was pretty surreal.
When you realize you ain't shit
Yeah.
compared to like the ocean or
Dude, I was still in
just,
I was still in the wading pool section of the ocean.
when the ocean moves your ass and you can't do anything about it, like, well, I ain't shit. I guess I better make sure I can get back to shore so I don't get taken out by some undertow
Yeah.
and fucking die because I ain't shit compared to this gigantic body of water.
Where does this wave end and begin?
Well, it's really weird where I think first my first impressions of surfing, it's like when you see somebody do it or when you see the way it's presented in media, it's like, oh, them in the wave. And then the way that media romanticized it, it's like, oh, it's just them in the wave and they have this one chance to like ride that perfect wave.
We can
But
thank
they
Patrick
kind of like,
Swayze and Keanu Reeves for
yeah,
that
I mean,
little
that's one of the biggest
microculture.
influences for sure. But then it's sort of like removes the notion that like, oh, this wave is just part of a gigantic body that is unified but also has individual parts. So when you're like so honed in on this microcosm of a wave and they're like, oh, you got to ride the perfect wave and you can only do it one time, it's like, well, if these waves are happening like this, it's probably happening really frequently. So this notion of like
I mean,
the perfect,
the visible portion of a wave is the portion that's above unity. So that's
right.
like there's so much more to it than what we're able to see at any point.
Mm-hmm. Um, so there's just a whole lot with how the romanticization of surfing culture and again really honing in on this microcosm has made it easy to forget the macro. And I don't know, I mean, I really doubt it's purposeful, but when you realize like, oh, we used to have Poseidon and stories about how Poseidon would ruin people's entire lives and journeys just to remind us that this whole body can like change our lives in an instant. Like, when we don't have a Poseidon in our culture reminding us that, yeah, water is like 70% of everything around us. We're really occupying the minority of everything on this celestial body. It's real easy to get wrapped up in the land animals. Everybody hates on Aquaman, But it's like, man, that's most of everything here anyway. Which is where I really do it, the way that well, not Judeo, very specifically, uh, the Protestant and because not you can't even really include Catholicism in this particular framing, but the post medieval anti mysticism Protestant perspective has been deeply rooted in a very binary projection of up and down, as like anything down is considered hell in like Protestant framing. And it's like, well, what about the other side of the planet? Like, no, they just don't think that far. And then anything up is heaven. So it's like, this is where you get these really binary framings, as if like people are pointing up at heaven, like as if the earth doesn't rotate, and then up would be a different trajectory in space when earth is in a different rotation. Like these people can't contextualize earth beyond their own geolocation. So the idea of like a macrocosm of a celestial body is too much for them to even fathom. So they never even get close to fathoming that. And that's where,
I mean,
then, sorry, go ahead.
I think the concept of a quantum gyroscope is just a little beyond the average the average person who doesn't take the time to understand like just basic Newtonian physics. I think that's also the only way that we could truly represent like the path that the Earth takes and how absurd it is to think of up as a direction. Like,
Well, and this perpetual reductionism, I think, is ultimately the root of this culture's inability to establish context. And that's kind of what, focusing in on the wave, then you don't see the ocean. And that's like ultimately whenever you get these romanticized quote unquote Eastern sayings like you can't see the forest if you're too busy looking at the trees and shit like that. Well, it's because Americans are so unilateral in their thought and unable to expand out to see the macrocosm, that kind of little quote unquote wisdom, it blows their fucking minds because they are so busy looking at the micro they can't.
The best part about that is like Shuangzi says, like that's how it translates to the most basic version so that it could be translated the easiest, but it's also the most like essentially it's like the child's version explanation. Like how would you explain it to a 5-year-old?
Right.
Yeah, it's like you can't see the forest if you're but for the trees. That's like, and that inspires thought of how how to exist harmoniously with nature, and nature within the greater context includes everything. And so we lose a lot because we can't speak the version of, we can't read the version of Chinese that existed, whatever, 2,300 years ago, 2,400 years ago. It's just good luck. I don't think I wager there's some historians who are really good at interpreting it, but nobody speaks that version of Chinese anymore. Nobody speaks the version of, nobody speaks Latin anymore. I mean, they kind of do in courtrooms, but not really. Languages are really incredible how they change. I mean, the fact that Chinese has existed for several thousand years at this point, that's incredible. And it's being used, but still evolving. Here we are with English, which isn't really that old in the grand scheme of things. Like modern English, shit, all of our rules, like the version of English that we speak. I mean, how old is America? It's only like 200 something years old, right?
Right, but punctuation I think is like I think it's like 300 years old if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, because I think it's like the breaks in between sentences um, and indication of a start and a stop. I think is like 300 to 400 years old, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. It's like because the issue is it something like that doesn't happen overnight.
Oh no.
So it's like one person, I mean not one person, but like one publication house may start using periods and capital letters.
I mean, now there's like the
But
Modern
then
Language Association that gets together every year to determine like
right, so
how
it
English
depends.
develops.
Sorry, excuse me. It depends on the level of coordination and organization that exists at the top of a hierarchy, and if that hierarchy exists at all. So like um, something okay when you have it's this is really crazy how this shit works out. So when you have like manuscripts being made and shit like that, there is like a standard that has to be kept within the manuscript makers so that for a while the manuscripts that get produced like have a higher standard of quality than the stuff being printed. So the idea of like, oh, if it's printed, it's higher quality than the manuscript. That's not even remotely accurate for a lot of history. And it's because the hierarchies that existed to create manuscripts had a longer history when than print when print first emerged. So then it's like you get all these inconsistencies across printing like houses. So when you get the emergence of rules within English, it's not like a hard emergence across all printing houses because the especially in the sense of like printing houses were trying to exploit information gaps, so they would take authors materials and print them and then like sell shit without like there's no real
Yeah, there's no
uh
copyright.
well, and I think it was it wasn't Jefferson. Like Isaac Newton was one of the people who was influential in England, and then in America I think it was like after Benjamin Franklin. I forget. There's like points when that's what whenever Charles Dickens came to America and started publishing, many publication houses were like just stealing the fuck out of his shit. So it was like that was around the time when uh, publication right and like copyright infringement became a bigger deal, when like someone who had written under a more protected system came to America and was like, "Hey, people are stealing my shit. We got to do something about this." So it's like there had been. It's like again, it comes in waves. So it like happened in Britain first, and then in America it happened later. And this type of thing where just because people are like, just because the technology improves, it doesn't mean the standards actually improve. But that's all to say that the standard of English language, it probably transitioned over like 100 years where people started using periods and capital and lowercase to discern between like end and beginning of paragraphs and end and beginning of sentences. So uh, modern English is very, very young. um, which is also it continues to evolve in a way I think a lot of boomers would be resistant to. Um,
Well, English is great because it has words like neologism, which describes formation of new words.
yeah,
It's built into the language. We can create new words using old words.
yeah,
Language is
and
is designed to change too. That's the best part.
yeah, for sure. I think the issue becomes there's this notion of once people graduate high school in America, that seems to be a hard stop as to when they there's like a cultural belief it seems that you don't need to like continue learning after that unless it's specifically for one type of job, and that's the craziest way to approach learning and information acquisition uh, at all. But how how everything concerning what people learn has been sort of oriented around earning and how much money they can earn based on the information they understand. It's like I think we have hit the peak creativity point of that approach to culture, and it happened really fast because I don't think humans have been approaching existence that way for a very long time. But within the context of like, if we're saying civilization is like well, we know it's at least 80,000 years old, probably more like 200,000, if not more than that. If we'll say it, civilization is at least 80,000 years old, the capitalist approach to existence has been about maybe 4,000 if we're really generous, 2,000 if we're like sticklers about definition. And then what I mean is like there's a stark difference between a monarchy that exploits things for the existence of the divine lineage. That's not capitalism. That's something completely different. So many people will be like, anytime there's civilization and there's trade, that's capitalism. No, it's not really. What I mean is when the actual structure of the government goes beyond the glorification of one dynasty or one family's name and is actually about the per, per, persistence of that local culture. At least it doesn't have to be about humanity, but it has to be at least about the local culture beyond one family. And this is where I mean, people can argue about it, but this is like capitalism in its own right should be about more than one person, because if it's about one person, that's like a monarchy. That's like not not even capitalism at all. So I equating the existence of commerce and trade with capitalism is a really reductionist way of approaching it that I think people who are in the capitalist cult would really try to assert. But again, this is where in reality the capitalist system of exploitation really existed for like 2,000 years if we're going to be sticklers. So that's where I'm like, in that context, it has accelerated the incompatibility of human existence with nature so quickly that we've hit this wall of like, yeah, we can't keep doing this anymore. And I think part of it is like in trying to exploit creativity, it's exhausted all of the means of its own existence really quickly because every cycle it has to become more and more novel to keep existing, and that has a shelf life. And in the process of information consumptions cycles accelerating, like when people started binging information, those cycles started going quicker. So it's like the public consciousness shattering and fracturing and also becoming shorter makes it really more difficult for the capitalists like plant a fad and then exploit the fad. That window got shorter and shorter and shorter to the point where capitalism can't even keep up with its own needs and demands, and it's gonna evolve into something else. They may try to make it worse, but the issue becomes pure exploitation. It's like fucking I'm pretty sure Sun Tzu asserted it's like you're supposed to attack all your enemies and steal their crops and shit so you don't have to grow your own. But then he goes on to say eventually you run out of armies to conquer, so that's not a sustainable strategy long term. And it's like you can't persist off of finding something to exploit and then exploiting it, never having created anything, which is why Elon is getting to the end of his like exploitative rope, and then by proxy of all of the people who believe in that structure ending on investing in one person, they're ending their own cycle because they haven't diversified their investment. And it's like by like all bets are on Elon. And now that Elon's like fizzling out, all those bets are gonna fizzle out. And that's what's happening. Like the stock markets were tanked, the crypto markets were tanked. This weekend is like I feel it in the air. That big we've been talking about the big nothing for like over a year now. I don't maybe it's even been 2 years. And it's like I feel it. It's 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 hit. It's hit the economy. And a lot of people will try to deny it, but I'll point to things like Nikola Motors. We won't talk about Tesla Motors right now. We'll talk about Nikola Motors because Nikola Motors is
They were going to deliver us some electric semi trucks, weren't they? They were going
or
to
so they claim.
they were going to
Or so they
revolutionize
claim.
the truck transit industry with their like batteries with like capacity beyond imagination and recharge times that would just, the technology was light years beyond anything the competition had. Well, it apparently light years beyond what the competition had also meant light years beyond what they had. Like,
And then you find out. So this company basically created this goal of delivering this semi truck that's an electric semi vehicle, and they're like, yeah, we'll be able to do it. Just give us a bunch of money. And they raised a bunch of money, over a billion. I don't know, it was billions of dollars, at least 1 billion. Let's say they had $1 billion. That's a shitload of fucking money. That's $1,000 million. 1,000 million. They had $1,000 million, not 100 million, $1,000 million, and decided that they were going to create this truck that's a semi truck. And they kept saying all along the way, this is not a roller. This isn't something that we're creating and we're just going to like have this empty shell of a vehicle. And then by the time we're supposed to deliver, we're not going to be able to deliver. No. This isn't us. And it turns out that's exactly what it was. So in the process of making these claims, someone along the way who had been a battery startup got acquired by Nikola Motors, but they lied about their capacity to deliver. So they bought this battery company that had fucking uh, faked it till they made it. And then once they made it, those motherfuckers just walked away because they just passed the hot potato off to Nikola Motors. And now you got this company who acquired this vaporware battery thinking that they could just buy their way into fucking delivering technology because the motherfucker who started the company doesn't know shit about the thing he's trying to deliver, but he thinks because I have money, I can just pay my way into getting it. Am I talking about Elon Musk now? No.
Nope, still not.
It sounds like this
Actually,
whole
it sounds like
thing,
you're talking to the My Pillow guy, but
it sounds like I'm talking about Elizabeth Holmes. It sounds like I'm talking about fucking the head of any company you can think of because that's what's been happening. It sounds like our government. It sounds like basically everything in America because people have charisma their way into positions of leadership, making decisions about things they have no fucking business making decisions about. And I don't think, I know we're at the end of it because I can see all of these things falling apart around us where I'm like, even our imperialism, the way that the American military used to be like all in everybody's business, all in everybody's backyards, just having our soldiers with our guns, just threatening them, reminding them like, hey, if y'all want to like not give us what we need, we'll pop off and then pretend some brown person hates your government and we'll coup your country. We'll just remind you like, hey, these people in these uniforms, we can make a fake coup. We can't even fake coup anymore. America can't even fake coup anymore, bro. That's some shit. That was like American as apple pie for like 50 hot years, where the CIA, that was like our global output. Fucking cooing your shit so our people can live in their fucking air conditioner, eat their fucking TV dinners with no actual flavor, eat these big ass fucking buffet platters, all this tasteless garbage food that's loaded up with high fructose corn syrup. We're going to hold your whole country and economy hostage so these motherfuckers can live comfortably thinking this is the best country on earth. Meanwhile, this is all that capitalism is delivering. More ways for people to get fat and sit on their fucking couch and live vicariously through Chris Hemsworth and never actually have to leave their house and never have to see why they can sit on their couch and watch fucking Chris Hemsworth pretend to be all these different people. And then they're going to their cubicles, putting their fucking blinders on and living in that bullshit imperialist cycle. That shit is over. Because not only do we have to pull back a lot of our military because of various reasons, but the shit that we were putting out to distract people, they had too much fucking time to consume it. So now it's not good. It's all like the cycles of consumption are such that if people consume too fast, they burn out their taste. And then there's nothing left for them to taste to keep them stimulated, whether it's food, whether it's shoes, whether it's clothes, whether it's cars, whether it's movies, comic books, toys, you fucking name it. This cycle of consumption, the only thing that they were able to do is make it go faster. And the inevitable result is burnout in every single venue. So this is where I'm like, the big nothing is here. I can feel it. I can feel it, which is where I'm like, I'm not saying anything that's bad. It's more so like on the other side, that shit can't persist. Like the math, if anything is going to work, on the other side of the big nothing, the math is going to have to work out. You're not going to, like, no one is going to be able to create these vaporware organizations because they're going to fizzle out too fast to persist. You're not going to be able to fucking do a Theranos fucking scam for 9 years and get away with it because it's going to get called out 9 months in and people are going to be like, hey, this motherfucker didn't graduate from college. And it's like, that shit is not to say that people can't do things if they didn't graduate from college, but that was a huge red flag that people should have caught on to, is this person not being able to finish things, as to why Theranos was never going to fucking work out. Because this person is perpetually unable to finish things. Am I talking about Elon Musk? No.
No, we're talking about Elizabeth Holmes.
But it can apply to Elon Musk. Because this is the big nothing.
Well,
all these people, Peter Thiel or Teal or whatever the fuck you say his name, this dude, if you go look this up, anybody who's listening, this motherfucker will pull people out of college, give them like $100,000 to start a business, and they never fucking finish college, and their businesses usually get blown up so much with the pump that they never have to actually deliver the product that the businesses are meant to, because they get such a high valuation that they can pivot and acquire something else by the time that they were meant to deliver the original thing. This is the fucking grift. I'm on to it because I've seen it so many times and I've been around it and I've seen how it's meant to play out, that I can break down the grift, and even as to how it's like it's meant to use the short-term memory of the public to its advantage, so they don't realize, like, oh yeah, Elon Musk was supposed to be delivering Tesla taxis, not Twitter. This is when he promised Tesla taxis would be using your fucking car to make you money while you're not using it. Well, guess what? That shit ain't happening because their cars are too busy fucking accidentally killing people because the auto drive doesn't fucking work the way it's supposed to. But he's Twitter owner now. What the fuck ever, like, Tesla taxis can fuck off, I guess. And they'll never deliver that because that was never the plan. They were never going to deliver the Tesla taxi. It was just promise you something big enough and cool sounding enough that people will throw money at it and they can invest that money in something else that already works and then try to monetize that. Now you hear Elon Musk trying to monetize viral tweets.
So
what the fuck is that going to look like?
So I was reading about the best-selling electric vehicles in China, and they are not Teslas. They are not Neos. They're not, the Xpeng Dragon, whatever the fuck they call them. They are these weird, unregulated class of mini cars that are, in the past, traditionally were always marketed towards the elderly. And I'm talking about golf carts that have what amount to car bodies and lights and air conditioning in their cars. And they're completely modern looking. They have airbags. They go, 45 miles an hour. Some go 50 miles an hour, which is pretty substantial for a golf cart. And, they got plenty of range for a golf cart, good 100 miles or so. And they're affordable. I mean, like, completely, the bare bones version of them is like $600 US. The most expensive one that you can find is only $5,000 US. And people are buying the crap out of them. And they use readily available motors that have been on them, like, been available to manufacturers for years to make golf carts. Mercedes is a part of this industry. They make some of the nicest golf carts on earth. The nicest, like,
Wild to think of. It sounds like so foreign. I mean, obviously it is technically the definition of foreign, but like for a country that just is basically pure pollution and consumption with no mind as to why, and actively asserting it doesn't care why, the idea of driving modified golf carts that are electric vehicles that you can basically charge in your fucking garage is fucking that's cool as shit. That's
People,
like that to me is futuristic.
they're buying
You don't
them.
have to be flying.
They've got fucking like electrical outlets all over the place. So the people just park and then they plug them in like they're charging their phone. At
Man, that to me is the future, and it don't have to be like flying shit that drives itself
no,
necessarily. Like,
it's just an
you know what I'm
electric,
saying?
just a little electric golf
Just
cart.
that,
It's
because then
nobody
you
goes
add
fast enough to get hurt.
well, and then you add the solar panels that are sourced without children's
Yeah.
labor, without polluting the most possible it could, and then we're living in a completely different universe
Well,
almost. And
we're
that's where I'm like, it's just little things that we have to do.
from
It's like,
from what
sorry,
I've
go
read,
ahead.
we are a few years away from the lithium sulfur battery, which promises like 3 times the stored energy potential per volume for a given volume that lithium, nickel, cobalt batteries possess. So for the same size, 3 times the juice. And then we're maybe 5 to 10 years away. Not even that, probably. It's more like 4 to 6 years because the technology keeps getting better and better from sodium sulfur batteries, which promise 10 times the stored potential energy of current battery technology. So, and sodium and sulfur are like two of the most plentiful elements. Sodium is literally abundant as it gets in our oceans, and we can get untold amounts of sodium from pretty much every hydrothermal vent that exists. It's just being pumped out. No children involved. No child labor. I'm still really miffed by the idea of people that are like claim to be environmentally conscious but don't give a shit about child labor involved in batteries for electric vehicles, and then talk about wanting electric vehicles.
Well, I just don't think they know. I don't
Yeah.
think they know.
I
I
think
think
some
this
of them
stuff
don't
is
care.
actively hidden from, and yeah, I don't think some of them care either. And they'll then virtue signal as if like they are going green, even though their process includes child labor. So yeah, it's a really weird. I'm glad that Teslas aren't the leading electric vehicle in China. And I don't. I think in about 5 years that'll probably be true for America as well. And the main thing is that there's a shift in the manufacturers' views towards electric vehicles. Where I saw an electric Mustang on the road 2 days ago. Um, I'm starting to see other electric vehicles that aren't Teslas where um, people like my dad, he's never going to drive a fucking Tesla, but he's also never going to drive an electric Mustang that looks like a Tesla. Because if you look at these electric Mustangs, they're just fucking Teslas with the Mustang logo on it. So, my dad, I'm not saying my dad is everybody, but people like my dad are going to resist the Tesla for various reasons. But one of the big reasons is that the design is like, the aesthetic is kind of garbage, man. Like, honestly, at first, if you look at the older, or not even the older ones, but like the newer Teslas, like, oh, this kind of looks cool. But then the more you look at it, it looks like a fucking 12-year-old boy drew the car and was like, this is the car I want when I'm a fucking man. And you realize like the lines suck, the actual curves on the car suck, and it's like aesthetically not a really, it's like the most basic design you could actually get on a vehicle, where I'm like, as someone who believes myself to be an aesthetician in the sense of like, I like things that look interesting. It doesn't have to be symmetric. It doesn't have to be uh, standard traditional beauty. It has to just be interesting. The Teslas don't actually look interesting. There's nothing interesting about them.
So
Visually, the Tesla Roadster used to be interesting, but these new things, they're just like bland. It's
so
fucking food without salt.
years ago there was this Porsche that was rejected and ended up becoming a Mazda RX-7. And years later, Audi and Volkswagen Group purchase. They're all merged, and so they all start sharing design language. And lo and behold, there's this bastard-looking car, the Porsche Panamera. It's like a four-door 911 looking thing, and it looks much better as the Audi A7. But they still released it as Porsche Panamera. A lot of the Tesla lines remind me of a 20-year-old rejected Porsche design that Mazda wouldn't even do. Like Mazda always has had good lines in their cars for the last 2 decades. I think their cars actually look the best right now. I'm not gonna lie, I have a Mazda, so I'm kind of biased, but there are a lot of cars out there that are they're the result of decades of design and refinement. And so we're like, I mean, how many years have Tesla's been on the road? A decade?
A little over, yeah. I think like
They have
2008, 2009.
I mean, they're like babies. They've been on the road for a decade. Their designers and engineers have only had like a decade worth of data and feedback to analyze to make, real changes and to even be able to perform real analysis of what's going on. And I know there's a lot of, the industry's leading designers and best engineers and all this other stuff, and they've got all the, the best minds that Tesla could afford and all that stuff, and they're doing their best. But I don't know. I just don't want to. Golf carts aren't very fun to drive.
Well, it depends because the ones that weren't fun to drive didn't really have shocks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's the issue.
No,
And
that's
then
a
you
good
get
point. That's a really good
the
point.
Gators have shocks on them. They're way more fun to drive.
Yeah, but
They're mostly gas powered, but they don't. The issue is I think it has to be powerful enough to handle the weight of the shocks to like make the charge last like as long. So I think that's why generally the golf carts don't.
and
I mean, I don't know.
and
'Cause those are pretty heavy too.
side by sides are basically golf carts with motorcycle engines, and they're fast as can be, but they're also basically motorcycles, so they're not electric. And then there are some electric like quads out there, but they have limited range. And so I'm pretty sure that part of the reason people get that stuff is because they want to go way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about this. I think it's really strange. Well,
I mean,
I think the
like all
issue
of
is
the big three truck manufacturers, they're making electric trucks and they look like normal trucks. They don't have to redesign the wheel. I think Hyundai and
well,
Kia Group, they've done a really good job with their like Niro and Ioniq. Those things still look like vehicles, like cars. They haven't tried to make a spaceship yet.
I think one of the issues. So hear me out.
Okay.
The design is not integrating different methods of charging because on their own individual methods of charging would not be adequate. But if they had solar panels on every visible surface, but people want paint, and then they had a RAM injection that used the air movement to recharge the batteries while the car is moving, you start to add up different methods of charging, and it becomes something that can then be charged less frequently, but on their own, these methods aren't going to knock off enough for them to be implemented in their design. But this is why, again, like it's not people. I mean, not people. Industry is not concerned with those things, whereas an individual would be more concerned with trying to create that type of vehicle because they don't want to stop and charge. Like they don't want to be tasked with stopping and charging.
Man, you know that somebody's gonna like the RAM charger is they're gonna have the RAM air charging system. Someone's gonna get like a little stand and they're gonna strap a fan onto it and put a tube on it and feed that straight into it. So when they're parked at home, they can run an extra fan to like increase the charge factor by 0.2% or whatever it increases it by. That's totally gonna happen.
I mean, but bro, that's how you could use that shit to make it a turbocharger for an electric vehicle. You
Yeah.
see what I mean?
No,
It's
yeah.
like on the one hand, it could be used for charge, but if you want to go faster, that's how you turn it into a fucking turbocharger. Is like just reverse that shit, and then it applies the torque that you were using to charge the battery back to the tires. This is where I'm saying people are not. They're thinking in too much of a binary way. Whereas, like, well, if you can charge the battery, well, you can exert power onto the tires then, and that's why, like, I was saying it's like a ram jet charger in the first place because you just fucking reverse it, and then now all of a sudden you have a turbo electric fucking vehicle that has a goddamn ramjet in it. You see, and that's where I'm like, it the way that there's just such a binary approach to these things is like, man, it can be used to charge, but if you're trying to like go faster, it can also do that shit too. Um, and again, that's where I'm like, as someone who likes to go fast, but also doesn't like to stop and recharge as like at all, it's like I know it needs to be stopped and recharged at some point, but as you allude to, these uh, lithium developments that will allow more what is it, salt, I think that was the aluminum.
It's the sulfur
Nickel.
component. We're getting rid of they're going to ditch the cobalt and nickel for sulfur, and then they're going to ditch the lithium for sodium. And then
Yeah, so once those batteries are starting to be more implemented, then it's like even less likely that you need to charge as frequently.
yeah.
So these things are ultimately,
I mean, well, I think a
As-
lot of it's going to come down to infrastructure at that point. Like, where are we going to be able to charge? Like, the Chinese golf cart model has people being able to plug in at every parking space, but with the kind of demands that drivers in the United States put on their vehicles, we've got to have rapid charge facilities all over the place. I'm still not. I'm still, wary of this whole thing. Like, I mentioned it in Discord. I don't think that. I don't think that any battery is. I don't think battery designers have ever delivered pizza, and I don't think they understand the kinds of demands that kind of driver puts on their vehicle. I don't think a battery will ever meet its manufactured life expectancy at being operated by a food delivery driver, which is like
at the same time, have you noticed Pizza X in town? Their delivery is in a golf cart looking vehicle, bro. And you just reminded me. So they have a delivery vehicle for campus that is about the size of a golf cart.
Yep. I've seen those things. Those things are cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool as fuck.
I'm
'Cause
pretty
I
sure
didn't
those
think
things are
about
powered
that,
by like motorcycle engines.
But that's I
That's
think
cool.
you're right. But this is like a way where it's like, yeah, somebody doing delivery doesn't actually need to be driving that big of a vehicle in the first place, which is where you see in Turkey, a lot of the deliveries are on mopeds or motorcycles, which is where they're able to get in and out of like places that cars can't go anyway.
Yeah.
But the delivery vehicle here's the thing. a delivery driver shouldn't have to use their own vehicle. So the more a delivery place has a vehicle that is specifically designed for that job, the less we're going to have people destroying their own vehicles for delivery services. So I think that's another part of the economy where we've switched to the gig economy. Well, eventually all those Uber drivers' cars are going to fucking break down and they're not going to be around anymore. And there's not going to be any kids who are going to be able to buy a car. So they're going to see the option of like the indentured servitude Uber programs don't actually pay off, because you see the people that get stuck in them, they have to work like 8 to 10 hours every day and they never end up getting the car. So those people's shit didn't pay out enough to incentivize a new wave of them.
Well,
So
that car would be able to
go ahead.
last 200,000 miles if they drove it with the light duty schedule, meaning like I think it's like 6 to 8,000 miles a year is light use. And then like once you breach like 8 to 12,000 miles, you get into moderate use. And once you break 12,000 miles, that's like the severe use maintenance cycle. And I think you have to go online for like I don't remember seeing it in the manual for my cars. Like I had to go online to find the severe usage maintenance cycles, and everything is dialed in sooner. Like the service intervals are much shorter.
Oh, yeah.
And if someone's driving 12,000 miles a year, they better be changing their oil like every.
At least twice.
Oh
if not
no, I mean
more,
like
3
probably
times.
like 4 times a year, every like
Yeah.
2,500, 3,000 miles for real. But like
Mhm.
if one is driving casually and 6,000 miles a year,
Yeah.
then you can get away with changing your oil maybe even once a year if you use the right kind of oil, like a full synthetic, and you have a brand new car and you've taken really good care of it and you don't drive hard and it never overheats or has a chance to get warm even because you only drive less than 40 miles a day kind of thing. And that model, it's possible to extract the entirety of the value out of a vehicle, but commuting is so hard on modern cars, and they're not as robust as we want them to be. They're made out of plastics to save on weight, and they're great. Modern cars get unbelievable. What kind of fuel economies does your Subaru get?
It gets like, well, it's a hybrid, so it gets like 35 to 40 miles a gallon
And it has all-wheel drive.
in the city. And then on the highway, I can add miles on.
Yeah.
So here's the great thing about it is if you drive it the way it's meant to be driven, like if I drive to Indianapolis, I can add miles on instead of like losing miles. So it becomes like I can get up to speed and then just hit the gas when it needs it. So most of the time I'm actually charging. So there's times I've like left for Indianapolis with say 190 miles on the what's left, and then when I get back it's like 240 miles is left.
So
Like straight up.
No,
And
that's
I've done
awesome.
it multiple times because I know how that car
so
works. I know how the engines work.
So my point with all this is that modern cars are manufactured in such a way that they are like very free flowing. They reduce resistance anywhere they can, so they can improve thermal efficiency. And so even a hybrid that has a heavy ass battery and an electric motor and an all-wheel drive system, because it's a Subaru, like which is another an extra 150 pounds at least, 250, 300 pounds sometimes, like that vehicle is still able to get what I would consider really fucking good fuel economy. Like that's the thing. Like 20 years ago, that car would have gotten 20 miles per gallon, and you'd have been really pleased with it.
Well, and you can only put 10. It only holds 10 gallons in the first place. So right there, it's like you can't put 20 gallons in it if you wanted to, unless you just fucking put it in the trunk in a container. But
I think my Mazda only holds like 13 or 14 gallons. I think my truck holds 20 gallons.
but with that, like the Jag, I think it holds 12 or 13, but I can't add on mileage onto the amount left the
Oh,
way I
your total
can with the
distance.
high. Yeah, because it's like it's not. It's charging the battery that is used for the electrical functions, but when you're driving on the highway, there's like a secondary battery on the sub that gets charged like for uh actual use on the drivetrain that doesn't you can't do that in the city.
Yeah.
Like I can't add miles onto the sub in driving in the city because there's too much stop and go. And that's what I was going to get to. The wear and tear on vehicles, I believe, is from the stop and go, not so much from necessarily the mileage. Because if you have somewhere like 60,000 highway miles is not the same as 60,000 city miles remotely.
Oh, sure. A lot of that
Um,
has to do
and
with
then,
continually disengaging and re-engaging in gears, and then
right, right,
applying power to the system, then removing power to this. And these are machines. They're not
yeah,
like willy-nilly about it. They are like instantaneously like engaging gears and coupling clutch packs, like a motor spinning. Like, well, let's see. There are 60 seconds in a minute, right? And at 600 RPM, that would be a really low idle. But 600 RPM is, what's that, 10 revolutions per second? That's really fucking fast. Holy shit, that's fast. And it's logarithmic. So once you keep spinning faster, because it's metal and all this stuff, there's gears, and those gears make things spin even faster. By the time it gets to the wheels, holy crap! And granted, a lot of that's been reduced, but still, things are spinning like crazy inside cars.
yeah. It's okay. So this is a great example of when you say 10 revolutions per second, just trying to mentally picture that is like a great thought exercise,
Oh
and then
yeah,
trying to increase that speed. I think this is the type of thing that people take for granted, in the sense of like that's how you actually improve your ability to think about things and shit like that, where it's like it's not the necessarily knowing that it's 10 revolutions per second. It's like, can you even begin to fathom what that is in
well, that's only 600
like
RPM. If it's 1200 RPM, then it's 20 revolutions per second.
exactly. And then it's like the ability to even think about what 20 revolutions per second is is something that makes you able to then conceptualize like, oh, this is how an engine actually works. Like somebody who can't think about 10 revolutions per second or what that actually means will never understand how a fucking engine works.
Like we're not even
It's
getting to the
just, it might as well
crazy.
just be.
We're not even
Sorry,
getting to
go
the
ahead.
crazy part that involves like timing chains or timing belts and camshafts or push rods or valves,
Yeah, yeah.
or the complexity of the concept like an
How to
electromagnet.
apply that to the drivetrain.
Holy crap! Or like an electromagnetic valve train that doesn't even have those things.
And then add brakes.
Add
How
brakes to
do
it.
brakes
Wait,
work with
how do we
that?
control like how we deliver fuel even? Oh, let's do it with our foot.
Right? Which is actually a throttle, and it's like the way that these things have been compartmentalized. I only really think about a throttle when I'm driving certain types of cars, where I'm like, okay, this is a fucking throttle, because as soon as I like let a little gas into a little aerated gas into those chambers, I'm fucking flying. This isn't driving. I'm
Yeah,
flying. And
you're unleashing it.
yeah, and this is where the like somebody who actually this is the difference between a Tesla driver and a car person. Like somebody who is a car person knows when they are piloting a vehicle that has a throttle versus a Tesla person just drives. They drive cars. And that's where I'm like, when I'm like piloting a vehicle, it feels like at any given moment I could just take off because I can feel my tires connected to the road and I can feel when I'm about to lose that grip. So that's where all the aerodynamic shape and the aerodynamic engineering of the vehicle is felt at every split second when your hands are on the wheel. Somebody who's a Tesla driver doesn't feel that. They don't know what that feels like, which is why they're trying to buy the notion of being that person without actually having to do the work of like learning the difference between an automatic and a manual and an electric and how they drive differently to understand why gears need to shift in the first place. Which is where a person who pilots vehicles can drive like a fucking 89 Escort, racing that on a track against somebody in a Tesla and fucking beat them. And it's like, it's not about the car, but the Tesla owner thinks they can just buy their way into being the person who wins on the track. That's not how fucking cars work. That's not how vehicles work. That's not how piloting vehicles works.
There is a video of a guy, the guy who sets the Nürburgring track record in a Tesla, and it's a blisteringly fast ride. But the in-car cam, you can tell that thing weighs so much. Like the guy is just like, if that vehicle didn't have as much assist on the power steering, that thing would not be able to stay on the road.
Well, and it's partially the assist on the power steering, but it's also him knowing when to let off the
Oh
gas.
yeah, well, I mean that guy's.
I guess not in this case. Let off the throttle because it's not gas.
I'm gonna call it a juice pedal because that's what it delivers. It delivers juice.
Pedal.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
electricity.
Yeah,
pedal.
it's a thrilling video because this person is obviously a highly skilled race car driver, and they are doing well in the Tesla racing circuit because they're getting enough attention that they feel like it's their opportunity to put their flag in the sand, so to speak. And it's a blisteringly fast performance, and it's like not quite white knuckle viewing the whole time, but it's quite impressive. I mean, when you realize how heavy those things are, even when they've gone through all the weight reduction, you can't get rid of that battery. My biggest concern with these things is when I watch like electric vehicle races, they're all really short. That's not any fun. I want to see I think the best electric vehicle race would be like a combination endurance speed race. Like how far can you get and how fast can you get, or how fast can you get there, kind of thing. Because we see real racing, like the most hardcore racing is in endurance racing when they've got to run the vehicle for 24 hours and it's got to work. It's got to be reliable. And so far, I don't think 300 or 400 miles is enough to finish any of the endurance races.
Oh God, no.
Like,
yeah.
Like, sorry guys, that's just not going to cut it. Especially if they were trying to keep up. Like maybe if they were going like 30 miles an hour the whole time, they might be able to make it a good distance around the. But they're not gonna. They're gonna be in like dead last. And so we don't get to see like real long-term reliability or survivability. We only get to see short bursts. And maybe that's the real market for the electric vehicles. The person who only needs to drive, down the street to the grocery store, or they don't have to go to the gas station anymore. What else? It's the person who doesn't actually need anything from the hardware store. The person who's going to have that
Well,
their
you're
washer and
nailing on
dryer
something.
delivered.
The more things that we're able to get delivered, the less frequent and the shorter those trips have to become.
Yeah.
So realistically, someone could have their groceries delivered. They could have any food that they didn't make delivered, and then they would realistically only have to go to get their car charged if they didn't have a way to charge it at home. Which is like,
Sorry, the idea of like the only time someone leaves their house is to take it down the street to the local car charging lot.
yeah, and at that point, it's like,
Sorry.
I think leaving is pretty voluntary and frivolous at this point in society anyway.
Yeah.
You don't really have to leave your home if you don't want to. Even for school or any, we can get online schooling up to any or down to any grade basically at this point. Even like I think they have, it's not necessarily kindergarten, but it's basically child. It's not childcare, but they'll,
If somebody can conduct the entirety of their postdoctoral research and submit it from like Antarctica research substation, never having to set foot on a campus, then we're like totally in the postmodern stage of education. The only barriers to distance learning are structural. And by structural I mean like local administration, because they need to protect their job.
yeah, we're on the verge of being in the post physical, if there is ever such a thing. But I also
Post classroom.
see that Luddites always exist, and there's always going to be people who are like, "Oh, I was raised in the physical, so I'm never going to let the physical go."
I think there's some things that would be very difficult to replace. Like, it's possible one might learn how to perform various like cooking or cooking techniques with just video and text-based instruction, but they might also be able to learn those things in like very very quickly with in-person instruction. Not to say that it's impossible. I'm sure it's completely possible to learn all of these things from a book without any physical instruction.
Well, with VR
Yeah.
and the capacity to like have your hands have something like a glove on it that gives you feedback, like haptic feedback now is possible. So,
Yeah.
Video is one medium, but you can have something that's visualized in 3 dimensions with haptic feedback now.
Well, exactly. If a doctor can perform brain surgery on the other side of the planet, I think it's possible that little Timmy or little Jill can experience whatever it is that they need to experience. I mean, we're experiencing other planets with robots, and that's better than good enough. That's like freaking amazing. So if experiencing Mars with a robot, or experiencing Titan with a robot, or experiencing Jupiter with a robot, Saturn, whatever, if that's good enough, then we don't have to be in class. Speaking of probing things, apparently NASA is making Uranus. They're like big. I'm actually being serious, and it's always funny. I'm never gonna not like share the Uranus jokes, but like they've made, not only have they made exploring Uranus their top priority over the next decade, they are in the final phases of like cementing the plans for their Uranus probe missions. They're going to probe Uranus. It's their top priority. On some level, we live in the best universe because someone thought they didn't realize what they were doing, of course, but they gave one of our planets like the best, most fun name, and I think it's like, I think that's actually the reason that there's a lot of funding into space exploration, because there's one planet that gets the best name.
Uh, yeah. Uh, if there was any more, I mean, NASA's done some cool stuff, but we need any more proof that it's become a joke.
It's surviving on like adult children who still get a kick out of it. That's the only explanation I can come up with. Like, what are we really gonna? We're gonna find a bunch of methane there that we can't harvest.
The same people that brought you Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah. Well, Bodie McBoatface did return a bunch of really cool ocean correlated to atmospheric information, and that was really cool. Because now we know that the ocean and the atmosphere are the same body. They just exist at different pressures and have different physical attributes as a result of it. But that's awesome. We know it's just like a big flame. The earth is on fire and it's just water and we can drink it and it doesn't burn us. But there might be some critter out, like some extraterrestrial, that like hydrogen dioxide just is acid and it burns them. They catch on like the equivalent of fire, and except we wouldn't see it as fire. They would just look like they'd be misting and screaming. Man, that's real dark. Sorry about that. I'm going to change subjects real quickly. So recently, a platform that we use called Restream.io, they allow us to send one signal out to multiple distribution platforms. And recently, they've added this little badge thing that says Restream, and there's a little X that says, "Hey, upgrade to remove this badge." But this badge doesn't appear in the YouTube archives, and it doesn't appear on Facebook. I just haven't seen it anywhere except on the website interface. And this is kind of like a really weak attempt at holding me hostage, is what it feels like. It's like, guys, seriously, this is just supposed to bother me. It doesn't actually result in any. There's no outcome. I don't have this blob thing appearing in my videos. Okay, I don't see the problem here. I'm definitely not going to pay them.
Yeah. As if we couldn't just change if it was appearing, as if we couldn't just change the aspect ratio anyway to just take it out. But that's where, like, I'm so tired of companies giving a service and then trying to hold its utility over our head after they've already given it to us for free. That whole structure of startups gaining users by giving them shit for free and then being like, "Oh, by the way, this was completely unsustainable, so now you're gonna have to pay us money." It's like I'm so against that anytime I encounter it, I actively rebel against it. So like the company I work for now, I remember at some point having the conversation like, "Hey, we're not gonna do this, right? Because right now we're it's free to use our platform. You're not planning on like flipping this and be like, hey, it's gonna be $3 or something." And they were like, no. So I'm so against that freemium approach where just like either give it to me for free or charge me.
Yeah,
Either one.
Make your mind, figure out your damn revenue streams, and then quit trying to pass it on to the consumer. Oh, you can't afford to do this anymore? Quit giving your freaking executives too many bonuses.
Netflix, speaking of
Man,
Netflix is crashing and burning really quickly.
It's that's what they get for poaching Shondavision from ABC. They tried to play in the big leagues, and they managed to land a big fish. But Shonda Rhimes and her team demand, well, whatever they demand, they get, because for the last like almost 20 years, she's been writing some of the biggest like broadcast TV stories that exist. Netflix screwed up so bad. I don't even feel bad for them. They started out like with the whole like no commercials. You know, we're doing this streaming thing. You can just, it's the same stuff as you would get from our on our DVD service. And lo and behold,
Netflix invented television.
I mean,
In
this
2022, their new invention is television.
Netflix now presenting Hulu.
Yeah. And it's shit like that where I'm like, man, this is over. This whole thing. Netflix ain't gonna be around in 6 years. At least not the way it is or the way it was in 2019. Netflix was the shit in 2019. And then they started doing shit like making movies like Jiu-Jitsu. Because I don't know if you've heard of this movie, Jiu-Jitsu, which barely has any jiu-jitsu in it at all.
No, I saw it, and then I looked at it and immediately like did the thumbs down thing, so it grayed out and it stopped suggesting it to me.
So we like tried to hate watch it last night just for fun and couldn't even make it through. Just it was so bad. I mean, and part of the intrigue was like, whose idea was this? And then halfway through, the only thing I could think of is that Joe Rogan must have commissioned that movie for his friend Eddie Bravo as like a love letter or some shit. And then it got out of his hands and got out of their control. And then it became something with like Nicolas Cage involved. And like, I don't know what person's mind conceived of this film, but it's totally some shit where there was definitely cocaine involved, at least cocaine involved, if not like maybe some meth and some acid. I don't know what kind of drugs they would have had to be on to concoct this mess of a fucking movie, which is where
I've got some guesses. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine.
But the idea that like Netflix is making those kinds of or was making, because they're not going to be able to pull that shit any longer. They're firing they fired their animation or the anime or whatever department, and then starting to fire a bunch of writers, canceling shows left and right, because they just churned out too much bullshit. They churned out so much bullshit that we end up with this movie called Jiu-Jitsu that's about, let me check my notes, a fucking alien who comes with a comet every 6 years and demands that 9 people face him in a battle royale tournament in which he always basically kills the people. But this comet that basically nobody sees every 6 years is passing really close to Earth orbit, and this is where the tournament happens. And it's vaguely like Predator.
Dude, you just described like the worst Predator / Mortal Kombat baby.
It's exactly, it's Predator. Somebody's like, what if we took Predator and Mortal Kombat and then added Tony Jaa and Nicolas Cage and then made it like 90% fight scene? The plot doesn't actually matter because we're really here for the fight scene. And then one minute, it's like the camera switches to the perspective of somebody who's like throwing punches, and it's like, am I Nicolas Cage now? What's going on? Like the audience is like throwing punches, and then the camera switches back to the other person, and it's like they try to do the first person. It's man. Like I guess the first person punch kicker, because you're not shooting, you're actually like throwing punches, but the
Wait, so it's like
conception.
Mortal Kombat plus Predator plus Hardcore Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it's a kitchen sink space fighting
But
movie.
then they throw these like little like interludes where you're looking at like a comic book, but usually the comic book doesn't actually have words in it, so you don't know what the fuck is happening.
So it's just a weird storyboard.
Basically, it's just basically a half finished storyboard that somebody colored in
So
and was like,
it's
yeah, we'll just use this to fill in the plot that we leave out.
yeah. So instead of like the cliche minutia of montage or the montage of stuff to explain a lot of things that they can't in an instant, they just gave you the storyboard.
Yeah. Well, and then with the
That's not
fight
even
scenes,
phoning it in.
no, it's not even phoning it in. Because then with the fight scenes, I'm like looking at the shit where they'll do some like flippy tornado kick or some shit, and I'm like, why didn't he just punch the guy? Because he was close enough where he could have just punched the guy, but no, this motherfucker throws some like triple flip tornado kick. Like, dude, why? Why would you do that? You just spent so much energy for no fucking reason. Like, do you know the camera's there? Are you stunting for the gram? Like, why are you doing this? Just punch him. And all of these over flourished choreographed fight scenes in 2022 look so bad. I can't even. I think there was a period in early early 2000s where over choreographed fight scenes looked cool because they hadn't really been done in American film that way. It's like, yeah, you can go back to the late 60s and 70s in Chinese cinema and see super choreographed shit. But in America, the really highly choreographed film fights were not really prevalent until uh like I said, post Matrix, really. You can't really look at Bruce Lee shit. That's not American. That's like a combination of Hong Kong cinema and
That's
then
Hong Kong
like,
cinema.
yeah, it's just with an Americanized studio, and that's where the real emergence of complex fight choreography in America doesn't, like, beyond Bruce Lee and that group is not until, because even then it's like some of the
No,
same fucking choreographers.
the
It's like some of the
the
same
only time you
choreographers.
see it would be Rumble in the Bronx. It was like an
Which
early,
is the same.
which
It's the
is
same overlap.
that's a
Which is
but that's
still
a
that.
Hong Kong movie
Yeah.
company that made a movie in America.
Yep. Yep.
And
Exactly.
then
So
Jet Li the One, which is arguably exists in the Matrix anyways. I'm fairly convinced that the One is Jet Li's contribution to the Matrix universe. It fits perfectly in every way.
the One and Dark City should both
Dark
be
City
canon
is
to the
definitely a
Matrix.
Matrix movie. But yeah, like Dark City doesn't have badass fight choreography.
No, but it has, for the time, badass uh
Psychological trauma.
supernatural fighting choreography. But I don't know if I call it choreography.
Yeah,
But like the
blocking. It's supernatural
um
blocking. By blocking, I
because
mean
what is it?
stage
They call,
descriptions.
I forget the name of their power. Is it the waking? Whatever it's called, but the main character can like manipulate the world and fly and like shoot
Yeah,
electricity and shit. So it's like he is Neo just without kung fu.
yeah. The One doesn't
Um,
always have to learn kung fu.
hmm
That's just convenient for that version
Yeah,
of the One.
I think it was like dated, and further, I think that was some shit where they were just like doing it for style more than function. Um, because yeah, you see a lot of the stuff in the Matrix where like the infamous Trinity jump up in the air kick. Just fucking punch him. Just fucking punch him. You didn't gotta do all that extra shit. Jump up, do a crane, fucking stop in midair. No, just punch him.
You know, if they were really going after some werewolves and zombies and ghosts, they would have had silver bullets and stakes. And I don't remember seeing any of them like stabbing anyone with a stake or shooting anyone with an explicit silver bullet, except for the threat that Persephone made, like when she let them into their suite or whatever. She killed one. She killed one. She's like, not everyone carries silver bullets. He's like, go ahead, go tell the Merv. Merv.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a plot hole that they probably tried to retroactively fix with that line, but yeah, there's lots of plot holes. So
they totally should have been carrying around like, and seriously, with those big ass black cloaks, they could have hid a wooden stake in there somewhere. They like, I'm surprised that they didn't have like a quick loading finder window built into their jackets where they could just pull stuff out like an endless bag of holding or something. Just, it's like, I need a new weapon. Hold on, let me pull out a wooden stake. I'm going to stab this vampire in the chest. Oh, crap, I missed. I need another stake. I mean, they're in the Matrix. Why not? Hold on, guys, I'm hungry. I'm going to pull out this, like, 3-foot-long sandwich. Obviously, sight gag. But
yeah, they should have loaded in sandwiches. They pick up the phone and sandwiches come out.
yeah, they answer the phone and a box appears next to her. I was like, oh, thanks, man. I needed that. I was hungry.
There's a lot of stuff about the Matrix where it's funny to have talked about it so much. We could like go through and mine our show to see what we were saying about it before and then what we said about it, knowing that there was something coming up, and then after it came out, because it's like we were talking about that shit before it was even settled that they were going to do the fourth film.
Yeah. It was still just a threat of a video game. Another video game. Oh, man.
Yeah. So I'm always... I feel like the last film said everything that needed to be said about it, which is why it's like not... There's stuff that can still be said, but it would feel gratuitous in its retreading. I think
that the meta statement of Neo forgot how to do everything. Trinity doesn't even remember who she was. Like, that's kind of who those people became. Keanu Reeves didn't like leave the set of The Matrix and then spend the rest of the days after like trying to recapture that sensation of being Neo. And Carrie-Anne Moss, she didn't give a shit. She went on, had her own career, and did all sorts of other things. Like, she's still doing whatever she does. Like, the whole idea that like she doesn't remember, that's like, that was so perfect. It's like they already moved on. They moved on so far that like they can be themselves on screen and it's believable.
Yeah, and when I saw a lot of the promo, it seemed as if they did carry a lot of themselves into that intro.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, this is what Keanu looks like without makeup. I mean, obviously they put makeup on him, but him and Carrie-Anne Moss were pretty much what they look like normally.
Yeah.
And I think that was an intentional, it did feel even down, and this is kind of where I'm like, if you uh looked at the Wachowskis and like looked at the way their film styles changed, then this film wasn't a shock. But anybody who didn't keep up or watch like Sense8 or some shit, this looks completely unexpected and way different. Um,
Well, I think if I think anyone who wanted more visual spectacle, like if they didn't get their fill with Speed Racer, then they're just never going to be happy because Speed Racer is a visual bombardment of sensory, just everything that goes. It you know how like you kind of had to come around with Batman Ninja and to
mhm,
realize like the visual stimulation that you were experiencing was all intentional and it wasn't just this like making me sick thing. And then I watched it again
right.
and it starts to make sense. Speed Racer is the same way. It is as much a visually compelling story as it is authentically Speed Racer, and even more so in the sense that when they're driving on these insane tracks that seem to defy physics in these cars that seem to defy physics, they're packing so much intensity. Like the last time I watched it, I remember crushed the armrests of my chair during the racing scenes without even realizing it because it's you have to turn up the sound pretty loud to get that rumble of their imagined racing engines, but it's worth it because they go to great lengths to make you feel like you're at some points inside the car itself. Like we all want it to be Speed Racer at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people really had nostalgia of Speed Racer specifically just because it was um,
It was a lot of people's
not
first
a
anime kiss. It's like,
well, but it's also not a violent antagonism, and I
yeah,
think the capacity to have the protagonist and antagonist take out their tension on a track versus in a violent exchange makes it a lot easier for different groups to latch on to it.
yeah.
Everybody's not into violence. Uh, and I think, again, this was revolutionary at the time in the sense of like, yeah, they're driving it out, not fighting it out.
And it's gorgeous.
Hmm.
Like
I mean, the original anime is gorgeous too,
no, I
which
mean
is
like
like,
the whole story, everything about it's great. Like even the anime like is intense as can be, even though there's very little detail. There's
yeah,
intensity in the way that the dialogue is delivered and the interaction, even though it's kind of corny sounding now. But when you're a little kid watching on a tube television, and the announcer's just raising the intensity even higher, and at any moment you can't tell who's going to win. Of course, Speed is going to win, but it's got to be really it's got to be really challenging to come up with those kinds of interpretations of old stories without like if you're too faithful, then it's directly compared to the source material, and then then it's everything you can do to fit inside the mold. And if any deviation is a serious flaw, and then if you deviate really excessively and try to make it unique, then it's inauthentic. And even though it's a new story, and it's impossible to write a news story now because nobody cares about insert random name who solved a problem and some saved some people from whatever situation. That's no longer interesting. We've got to have like it's got to have long-term series potential so they can create entire microeconomies around them. I wonder how the Hamlet microeconomy is doing.
Not too well.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a fuck about Hamlet anymore, right? Since the last time they made that Hamlet comedy, the one where the teacher has to, I think it's I don't even remember the fucking movie. It was pretty funny, but I think that's like the last time I remember Hamlet in like mainstream culture.
Yeah,
and it wasn't even really mainstream.
It's reduced to a self-referential joke. It's not even like. I wonder if Shakespeare is even being taught anymore, like outside of really dedicated like studies. Like I'm sure somebody's studying Renaissance English is going to read Shakespeare, but I wonder if it's even. I wonder if people are even reading it in like high school anymore. I say it like it's one volume, but it's like his work is several volumes.
Well, and it's like, well, should they? Should they? I'm not necessarily convinced that they should.
Probably not.
Like, I can see arguments as to why they should, but I don't know if those arguments
I think they
are valid outside of holding up this construct.
No, I think anything outside of like graduate studies or really advanced undergraduate studies would be like kind of a vanity thing. Nobody's speaking Old English in public, at least.
Well, because it's like Shakespeare's influence is because people got obsessed with him, not because he was like the greatest of all time or some shit. So it's like, on the one hand, this gets back to the notion of like the transition of rules in English. He was like one of the first people to like keep using like punctuation and shit. So it's like that, yeah, let's talk about that, but actually reading his plays and yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's necessary for middle or high schoolers in 2022 and beyond. Like you're saying, like,
or elementary school kids. They definitely don't need to be Midsummer Night's Dream in elementary school. That used to be like the gold standard for elementary school plays. Definitely should not be doing that.
Which is like, yeah, you can tell that the motherfuckers teaching that didn't understand what they were teaching. Because there's no way a kid should be actually reading Midsummer's Night's Dream. That shit is an orgy in the woods, a drug-induced orgy in the woods.
Yeah,
Puck wants you to forget that shit ever happened.
The god of wine gets
That's a drug-induced orgy in the woods, and motherfuckers who taught it never read it. That's where I'm saying that shit needs to be nowhere near children. But that's how you can tell motherfuckers never actually read the shit, or they might have read it, but they didn't actually understand it. And that's where I'm like, between Romeo and Juliet, like, motherfuckers attempting suicide because they're depressed. Nah, we don't. That's like too much. Kids don't have the emotional, intellectual complexity to understand what's actually going on with Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, this
Like the
chick is
fact that they're
pretending to kill herself
teenagers.
because her dad said you can't see him.
Mhm. The fact that they're teenagers in the story does not make it a story for teenagers. This is the weird shit where Americans are like, "Oh, it's a cartoon. It must be for kids." Motherfucker, this is like hentai. Like, no. Americans are so simple. It's like a
And Romeo and Juliet as hentai just gave me the weirdest set of mental images.
oh god. No, man. Well, because I remember like when anime wasn't really widely accepted, it was harder to, or I mean, okay, not widely. Let me rephrase that. It wasn't widely available to the point where I mean, it was like finding drugs
Oh
trying to
yeah.
find anime.
Yeah, you had to go out of your way, or you had like you found like one reputable, uh, what is it, video rental place that was always in like the back of a shopping of like a strip mall, or in the basement of another place, and they had one wall dedicated to anime, and all of the sleeves were always messed up because you and 100 other people have all handled that one sleeve. I remember those days. That stuff was rough.
The internet is it's so weird because then it's like the same shit with pornography where you'd like be walking in the woods and you might stumble upon a stack of porn or some shit or like a discarded VHS because people were weird about how they handled their fucking media. It's like you really just might stumble upon pornography somewhere because people didn't want to be seen with it in public or some shit.
So it's somehow better to be jerking off in the woods, get caught jerking off in the woods, than it is to be. Also, where the hell are they watching videos in the middle of the woods? That's what I want to know. No, man, there's definitely something to be said for a lack of availability of something, like giving whatever subculture that's interested in that thing more of a reason to go looking for it. Like, I know I wanted to watch anime because I thought they were incredible. Because who doesn't? Who did when they were when like what teenage boy doesn't like giant robots that can fly and have giant laser swords, and that stuff's awesome. You don't even have to know what it's about to think it's awesome. And sometimes you find out what it's about and it's not awesome, and that's okay. That's why we have options. Also, I remember like no options before like Cartoon Network had even attempted Adult Swim, when there was no anime on TV. We were lucky to get Voltron.
Yeah.
I also love Voltron. Like I reference the concept of merging to form Voltron as like a successful like outcome when a team can work together. But for the longest time, Voltron was it. And occasionally, like, you know, one of your friends might have like be like, "Hey, check this thing that I just got," and then everyone would, you and your buddies would watch it like 4 or 5 times, and then that's kind of it. You got to wait for another year to watch it again. That's exactly what happened with Netflix, except it was VHS. So we had to rewind it. So we had to wait, 3 minutes after watching it to watch it again. We couldn't just hit replay.
Yeah, and that's where the people who had the VHS recorders were the ones who were able to like do that shit, and that's kind of like I remember having TV shows that I had recorded, um, like Dino Riders or GoBots or some shit, but I had recorded them off of the
Dino Riders
live.
was awesome.
But I would only be able to watch one episode because I have to time it. So if I didn't wake up in time because they put them on at really odd hours, like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and it's like if you didn't wake up, then you couldn't fucking do it. So it's
Yeah.
maybe I maybe did that one or two times and was able to actually do it in a way
Man,
that
I
was useful.
successfully programmed the VCR clock one time, I've been able to set VCR clocks, for years. But one time I figured out how to. I can't remember what I did, but I got to get the time right, and I got it to program the record mode, and I was able to record one of those obscure TV shows at like 5 in the morning. I was only able to do it once. It wasn't like I wasn't able to replicate the process for some reason, even though you think that it's like, basically a calculator and setting an alarm. VCRs and microwaves or from that era, have to be the most unprogrammable piece of electronics that existed.
For no reason.
Yeah, for no reason. Why did they make it so fucking hard to program a clock?
Oh my god.
I don't know how many. I can't even begin to think about how many times I went to somebody's house and saw a blinking microwave or a blinking VCR. And you like watch a movie at your friend's house, and the whole time that thing's fucking blinking at you. It's like, why the what?
Nobody had enough time to learn how to set their shit. And
I'm sure that it happened, but I don't know for certain. But in my mind, there has to have been some like awkward window when when LCD panels, like basically clocks, were like had broken the whole like production cost barrier, and now you can just throw them on there for like pennies on the dollar type situation, tenths of a penny on the dollar, and everything had a digital clock on it. I bet there was like one production year where everything had a digital clock, whether it needed one or not. I bet none of those clocks work anymore. Our technology really isn't designed to last very long. I mean, save a few robots that went to Mars and lasted like a decade longer than they were supposed to. Like a lot of our stuff doesn't last very long.
ever since the Madison Avenue, don't matter, fake it till you make it group took over, American shit just is not made to last. Houses, fucking toys,
Well, apparently,
computers.
so there's this modern practice with houses where they're using this stuff called mass timber. It's basically heavily pressure treated wood chips and an industrial adhesive, and so the industrial adhesive itself is what provides the strength. And they're fire resistant, like they can withstand a direct torch, and all it does is just smolder, so they don't catch on fire. And they have to be wrapped in this plastic wrap so that they have a moisture barrier, so they don't start to absorb their ambient humidity or whatever. And apparently there are people who are building these brand new homes with these materials, and they're all experiencing problems because of the adhesives are off-gassing all sorts of nasty shit. And so as the adhesives slowly off-gas and the foams start to slowly degrade and break down and all that good stuff, it's causing a whole like just a list of health problems, respiratory problems, neurological problems, because people are being exposed to chemicals that they're told or that they're being told are safe. People just don't know what's.
Hey, maybe that's where QAnon came from.
Oh, they were huffing too much adhesive.
All those chemicals melting people's brains.
I mean, back in the 80s and 90s when we had those PSAs, this is your brain on drugs. I distinctly remember one where it was these kids who were pouring, what was it, model glue inside of a brown paper bag and huffing it, and you see this ring of glue around their mouth and nose, and is that what's happening? People just moved into the glue bag. But it's safe.
Oh God.
They've convinced people to move into the fucking glue bag. So if somebody lives in a glue bag, and we know what happens to people who huff glue, this is like a very well documented phenomena or outcome. Somebody who lives in a glue bag and they're exposed to the raw internet, unfiltered, because they know what's real information and what's not. I'm projecting here, but this may be the reason that we're having so many problems with, mass hysteria surrounding lies on the internet. Because I'm going to call that mass hysteria. The whole Q thing, that's some freaking mass hysteria. Holy shit.
That's the definition of mass hysteria if I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Those motherfuckers definitely would have thought the War of the Worlds broadcast was real.
Oh my God. The worst part is a bunch of those morons decided to basically, I don't think they decided to, they were willingly puppeted into breaking into federal election databases. This is across like 10 states. And it occurred to me as I was reading about it, like, this is a really serious cyber intrusion performed by like an absolute class A hacker. Like this hacker was so good, they were able to not only get the fucking pillow guy to be his handler in the United States and manage these people to the tune of like tens of millions of dollars, but he instructed them on how to access the data in these machines that normal people aren't supposed to even know how to access. Like, the fact that this isn't like just front page, everyone should be freaking the fuck out, because cyber intrusions of this scale shouldn't be happening. And this is like coordinated across multiple states, very likely not by American actors. Like, everything about it is just insane.
Maybe if we spread a rumor that it was the Russians, people will start caring.
I mean, obviously it was Putin, because only Putin is smart enough to pull off something like this. Oh man, have you seen the pictures of the tanks? That when they blow up the Russian tanks, the tops pop off.
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's hilarious. They're if you just search for Russian tanks exploded turret, and you'll see pictures of them. Sometimes these things blast off like 30 feet away, 40 feet away, and sometimes they blow up out and forward, and they clearly did like a pole vault off of their cannon. And it's the result of the way Russian tanks are designed and the way that they feed ammo and store their ammo around the turret itself, and they auto load. And so when those things get hit, they just kaboom,
Pop all the ammo.
Yeah, and then the turret and the gunner, they just pop right out. They get, I mean, obviously,
So it's like a gigantic M80 or some shit.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's terrible. And because it's not the munitions aren't chambered, they just kind of explode.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube.